France, the favourites. Just behind them, Shaq, Belgium, obviously, golden generation. We've talked about it for a lot of times going into big tournaments. They just fell at the last hurdle in the World Cup, beaten by France in the semi-finals. Back in the Euros, beaten by Wales, of course, a big surprise there. And the quarter-finals once again back in 2014. Expectation is so high because we know these players so well. They're at the top level. Kevin De Bruyne back in the squad, obviously, after the injury in the Champions League. Can they? Will they? Should they?
They should. I think they'll fall just short yet again. In the last two of those tournaments, with Belgium coming in, I think they were ranked #1 in the world and going into both of those, yet they fell at the final hurdle. Going into both those tournaments, I felt the one department that Belgium lacked is having that finisher. I don't think Lukaku, who was the out-and-out number 9, was a clinical enough finisher for them going into that tournament. Now, all of a sudden, with Lukaku playing his best football and probably able to deliver on that number 9 that Belgium needed in those last 2 tournaments, you go into this Euros without Eden Hazard, or certainly not the Eden Hazard that we know of previous years. You go into that to this tournament with Roberto Martinez preferring to play a back 3, but right now that back 3 includes Vertonghen and Alderweireld, who passed their best. And as much as Denayer has come in and contributed significantly, you still lack pace, well, certainly between the former two in your centre-back positions. Those are concerns. So while I think Belgium have improved in some departments, in some they've just fallen off, and I fear that, again, they're just better teams in this tournament.
Jurgen, do past failings in tournaments have any influence going into the next one?
Definitely. I mean, you want to see a progression over the years, from every specific squad of every nation. And talking about Belgium, obviously they had a very good World Cup in Russia, and so you expect them to go further. I mean, you want Roberto Martinez build on that last tournament and get them to the big triumph, because and you look at that squad overall, the squad and where these players play from Belgium, that is just an amazing squad, from Courtois all the way to Lukaku. In the middle you have De Bruyne, and if Eden Hazard finds his form again, maybe in the tournament, maybe with the Belgium group of players, and they have a good chemistry, they can really go all the way to the final and win that final. But you should have the high expectations in every squad that you handle. If you look at the England team, they had a very successful Russian World Cup too. So now, what's the next step? The next step has to be better than the last one. So get us in the final. I mean, that should be the goal for Gareth Southgate and his group, saying, our goal is to play that final, which is in Wembley, in England, in London, home ground. So go and get that trophy. That should be their expectations.
Meanwhile, expectations are quite low surrounding the Netherlands going into this tournament. Of course, it's been a rough start, hasn't it, for De Boer as he took over from Ronald Koeman. And Jurgen, it's been much discussed, this back 5 of the Dutch. Criticism from everywhere. Players questioning as well whether or not that is the right thing to do. They won today, but what interests me is the fact that how much does that affect a manager, or how much do you kind of go and stick to your guns with something that clearly he feels is right to go forward?
Well, I mean, those are all things that were said on the outside. Journalists speculate with systems, maybe here and there you get a player saying something, or maybe agents talk to journalists and come up with some stories. The systems nowadays, they don't really matter anymore. I mean, systems doesn't matter if you play a 3-4-3 or a 3-4-1-2 or 4-4-2 or whatever you want to call it. And a lot of people think when they kind of throw out these formations, they are really smart. This is BS. It's BS, because at the end of the day, it's how the team moves. And unfortunately, often on TV, we cannot really see the entire field. If you would see the entire field, you can really see how teams, once they lose the ball, squeeze the ball in one area, and it comes out of a complete kind of team effort. It's not the system that makes that happen. It's literally just the desire to squeeze the team in and get the ball again. And then once you have the ball, you open up. And it doesn't matter if you open up in a 3-5-2 or 4-4-2, whatever again. So I think those discussions are actually ridiculous. I think there's a Dutch team that has a lot of quality. Obviously, they have to prove that in the tournament, but I would just kind of ignore those type of discussions.
Stevie, 1986 World Cup, would you all gone to Sir Alex Ferguson and said, well, this isn't the right formation?
Not if you wanted to be on the plane on the way home, because he would have left you behind. Yeah, listen, I'm with Jurgen. You know, personally, you know, whatever you call it, the shape of your team is about when you don't have the ball. When you get the ball, you have to let your players play, and that means that they have to take some responsibility as well for their movement, for the decisions they make, all of those things that happen on a football field. So for me, the formation is about when you lose the ball. Okay, what shape do we get into to defend when we lose the ball? After that, it's about playing football and having the better players. You need good players to do that.
I watched the game today, Dan, and I think it's so easy to ridicule de Boer, what he did after he had his success at Ajax, and maybe that is also a part of the criticism in and around him. But it's interesting. This Dutch team is a quite interesting team. I'm not saying that they will go all the way, but you saw Weghorst today scoring his first goal. Depay was involved in all 3 goals. You have Gravenberch who scored. There he is, 18, 19 years of age. So they got a very interesting team. And De Jong, De Ligt, they could be an outsider here. And I think that we have to see around this thing, because the Dutch national team, there is always quarrel around that. So they normally always end up saying, well, they have to play like Rinus Michels or Johan Cruyff, or that is so typical Holland, and I only lived since 1967.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.